The Ravens, shout out to them, man. I mean, it's one of the greatest hypothetical teams of all time, the Ravens the last 7 years. And once again, it's a team that is an idea more than it is anything else.
Whatever criticism he's getting, I feel like sometimes Ravens fans can be a little spoiled, just like the amount of success that this franchise has had.
The 2025 NFL season has been absolutely wild so far, and I don't think anyone could have predicted how the standings would look through a month of play. The Indianapolis Colts sit at 4-1 and look like one of the best teams in football. The Jacksonville Jaguars are in almost the exact same situation, making that a tight yet completely unexpected race for the AFC South. However, I think the team that surprised everyone the most so far is the Baltimore Ravens, and it's for all the wrong reasons. They're not exceeding expectations this year. As a matter of fact, they're completely failing to meet their expectations. The Ravens currently sit at 1-4 and are a real threat to miss the playoffs after entering the season as Super Bowl favorites, and I'm gonna tell you why. So real quick before we get to today's video, this video is sponsored. I'm a little pissed off, guys, I'm not gonna lie. On Thursday Night Football, Devontae Smith's longest reception was 16 yards. Dallas Goedert got a TD. Jackson Dart got a TD. AJ Brown was open for a TD, and during a zero blitz, Jalen Hurts decided that his first read was Jahan Dotson and threw a near pick six instead of throwing a touchdown to AJ Brown. If he would have made the right read, we would have 11.5 extra money. 20 bucks would have been $350, and I am pretty butthurt about this. So I'm going to give you guys a much safer slip for Sunday. If you guys haven't signed up for Prize Picks, make sure you use my promo code Mikerophone to get $50 when you make a play of $5 or more. This week I have George Pickens continuing his touchdown streak against the Carolina Panthers. Matthew Stafford has thrown for over 350 yards over the past 2 weeks, and he's facing off against the worst defense in the NFL in the Baltimore Ravens. I have him throwing for over 260.5 pass yards, and I have Sam Darnold getting over a 15.5 fantasy score against Jacksonville. I'm going to try to 6x my money. $50 turned into $300. If you want additional plays, make sure you check out Fantasy Aces. We've been profiting each and every day on that Discord server. It's in the WAP link in the description down below, and thank you Prize Picks for sponsoring today's video. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Let's back this all the way up to week 4. In week 4, the Baltimore Ravens had arguably their worst loss in the Lamar Jackson era, getting destroyed in a 37-20 massacre, and things are looking very bleak in Charm City. Going into week 4's game against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, the Ravens' 2 losses were against 2 of the best teams in the NFL, the Buffalo Bills in week 1 and the Detroit Lions in week 3. And in these games, their offense still scored 40 and 30 points respectively, so they were being given the benefit of the doubt from both fans and the media. But after the Ravens, albeit dealing with a ton of injuries, got obliterated by the previously 1-3 Texans in week 5 in a 44-10 game, it's clear that they might not be a good football team.
Just coming into this game and that first drive and just watching it, this Baltimore Ravens team looked tired.
The Ravens have problems everywhere right about now, whether it's injuries or just straight up bad play. Every single aspect of the Ravens game right now is lacking, and this truly does look like a completely different team than we've seen over the last 2 years. The main problem with Baltimore this season has been their defense. Just 2 years ago, Baltimore had the best defense in the league, but after losing their defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald to a head coaching gig in Seattle, their defense has been subpar and has actually been the worst defense in all of football through the first month of the season. Baltimore has allowed 177 points in their 5 games played so far, which is by far the most in all of football, and they're right behind my Dallas Cowboys in yards allowed. Pair that with the fact that Baltimore has only recorded 6 sacks thus far, with most of those coming against old man Joe Flacco in week 2, and the fact that they've only forced 2 turnovers, and you don't only get the worst defense in football this year, you get one of the worst defenses of the decade. I mean, through 5 weeks, Baltimore has already allowed 12 more points than they did during the entire 2000 season. That is absolutely ridiculous. But at the same time, they're dealing with some major injuries on the defensive side of the ball. Yes, I know Lamar Jackson is taking most of our attention, but their star interior defensive lineman, Nnamdi Madubuike, is out for the season with a neck injury. All pros Roquan Smith and Marlon Humphrey are both out for multiple weeks with injuries that they suffered against Kansas City. And standout second-year cornerback Nate Wiggins is dealing with an arm injury, but that doesn't excuse how poorly they've played up until this point. It just lowers their odds of getting any better as the season goes on. Ravens fans fans aren't used to having a bad defense, and they made sure to show their frustration. But all-world safety Kyle Hamilton doesn't seem to think that their frustration is justified. Just listen to what he had to say after fans were criticizing defensive coordinator Zach Orr after their loss to the Lions in Week 3.
Whatever criticism he's getting, I feel like sometimes Ravens fans can be a little spoiled, just like the amount of success that this franchise has had.
Spoiled? No, the Patriots fans were spoiled. Kansas City fans are spoiled. You winning 10, 11 games a year and getting knocked out in the first round of the divisional round, that ain't spoiled.
Shannon Sharp put it perfectly. How can you call a fan base that hasn't seen a Super Bowl win in 13 years, that has continuously been disappointed in January, a spoiled fan base? Ravens fans expect their big name players to play like big name players, and when they don't, they have every right to be disappointed. However, it's not just their defense that has been disappointing. Despite their numbers on paper, the Ravens offense has been less than ideal as well. So far this season, the Ravens offense has put up just 141 points, but a lot of those points have come up empty. The offensive production just hasn't been good enough, and there's a huge reason why. They have been getting destroyed in the trenches over the first 4 weeks. In the 4 games Lamar Jackson has played in this year, he has already been sacked 15 times. He only got sacked 23 times total last season. Lamar is arguably the hardest quarterback to bring down in the backfield in the history of the NFL. So 15 sacks through 4 games is absolutely horrible, and a major sign that the offensive line is a crucial part of the Baltimore Ravens' lack of success. I'm going to show you a couple of plays from Baltimore's game against Kansas City in Week 4 that show you just how bad their offensive line has been, and just how much it's affecting their game plan. This first play is actually a play where Lamar was able to pick up a first down on the ground, but man, he should have had even more. Every play truly begins before the ball is even snapped, and this play is no different. Lamar and the Ravens line up in 11 personnel, but with their tight end Mark Andrews, in this case off the line of scrimmage, and the running back Justice Hill lined up next to Lamar in the shotgun. That's a problem in of itself, but we'll get to that later. Kansas City lined up in an interesting set on this play. There are 2 edge rushers on the outside of each of Baltimore's tackles, with an extra one off the left tackle, and the 2 defensive linemen in each B gap, leaving Nick Bolton as the only man over center. It was obvious that Baltimore was passing here, because Baltimore loves to make it obvious by putting Justice Hill in over their Hall of Fame running back. So there are 3 things that Bolton could do on this play. 1, he could blitz, attacking Baltimore's Pro Bowl center Tyler Linderbaum, or he could sit in the box as a spy, which has worked miracles for Detroit just a week prior, or he could drop back into coverage. Well, once the ball is snapped, we get our answer. Nick Bolton drops back into coverage, but instead, Steve Spagnuolo rushes 4 off the left side, forcing Mark Andrews to make a huge block, and forcing both the left tackle and the left guard to make a decision. Well, luckily for Lamar, Linderbaum notices this, and he helps out the left guard by helping him pick up a wrapping Drew Tranquill, because if not, Tranquill would have had free reign into the backfield due to the beautiful pass rush scheme. However, there's one player unaccounted for on this play, right guard Daniel Falele. Daniel doesn't have a matchup, so he goes and finds someone to block. He moves to his left to help out Linderbaum on Tranquill, even though I'm not sure that a safety needs to be teamed on a pass rush. Then, instead of actually blocking Tranquill, he pushes him off of Linderbaum, allowing him to chase after Lamar, who smartly rushes to his right, considering the hefty pass rush coming from his left. If Tranquill wasn't a free runner, Lamar probably could have gotten 20 on this play, but due to a complete misplay from the offensive line, it only resulted in 10. The next play I want to show you is similar to the last one in the way that the defense is set up, but it creates a completely different result. Baltimore once again lines up in a shotgun formation with 11 personnel, and Kansas City once again lines up with more defenders on the left side of the line, with Nick Bolton as the Mike defender in the middle of the field. This time, however, Nick Bolton doesn't sit back in coverage once the ball is snapped. As soon as Lamar calls for the snap, Bolton explodes towards the line of scrimmage. Now, I'm not sure if this was his assignment or not, but this play by Daniel Falele was an absolute joke. He moves to his left in an attempt to double team Chris Jones, but even if that was his assignment, Jones was already double teamed on the other side of the ball, and Daniel had Bolton rushing right at him. What he should have done is realize that he's the only guy between Nick Bolton and Lamar Jackson and focus on blocking him, but he doesn't. Instead, Bolton runs right by him and finds himself face to face with Justice Hill, who's on a check and release. Hill seemed a bit too focused on the release portion of that assignment because he completely missed his block on Bolton, allowing him to rush at Lamar at full speed, basically untouched on his way to the backfield. Lamar saw Nick Bolton blitzing, but he thought he could count on either Daniel Falele or Justice Hill to make a block on him, considering they both found themselves one-on-one with the linebacker, so he didn't pay much attention to it. When Lamar finally notices Bolton running right at him, he rolls out to his right in an attempt to create a play, but unfortunately for him, George Karlaftis sheds his blocker on the right side of the line and takes away any lane that Lamar Jackson has, getting him near the sideline and forcing him to attempt to throw the ball away, which actually ends up being an intentional grounding call because the ball didn't cross the line of scrimmage. The last play here isn't as much of a bad play by the offensive line as it is a bad play by Lamar Jackson, but there's an underlying reason why it happened. This is a simple four-man rush for the Chiefs, and once the ball is snapped, the offensive line genuinely does a good job of blocking said four-man rush and gives Lamar Jackson a clean pocket. Usually this is where Lamar thrives. Over the years, he's become arguably the most dangerous passer in the game from a clean pocket, but here things are much different. These routes had time to develop, and when DeAndre Hopkins makes his cut on the bottom of your screen, he ends up being wide open in between two zones in Kansas City's cover 2. By the time Hopkins makes his cut, Lamar Jackson is still in a clean pocket and would usually be able to find Hopkins here for an easy gain. But instead, Lamar starts to panic. He steps up in an attempt to avoid an incoming edge rusher, but there really wasn't anybody there to threaten him. However, there was now. Lamar steps up directly into the arms of a defensive tackle for a sack. This could have and should have been completely avoided, but we're at a point in the season where Lamar Jackson doesn't trust his offensive line at all, and he's starting to make things worse for himself because of it. Not only is this offensive line a problem for Lamar, but it's a problem for Derrick Henry as well. After his week 1 outburst against the Bills, Henry has only recorded 148 yards on 3.2 yards per carry in the following 4 games. On top of that, he's just not touching the ball nearly as much as he should be, so the run isn't set up whatsoever. This is a coaching staff issue, and that brings me to the person who I think might be hindering this Ravens team the most, John Harbaugh. Under John Harbaugh, the Ravens have failed time and time again to get the job done when it matters, choking game after game and underperforming when the lights are at their brightest. I firmly believe that the day that John Harbaugh is no longer the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens, their Super Bowl window might open back up. Until then, Ravens fans are going to have to continue dealing with January disappointment, as for this season, if something doesn't change, they might not even make it to January, especially with Lamar Jackson due to miss 2 to 3 weeks with a hamstring injury. So Lamar Jackson's injury wasn't already bad enough, right? The Ravens were sitting at 1-3, their defense was getting absolutely torched, their offensive line couldn't protect anyone, and now their 2-time MVP quarterback goes down with a hamstring injury. But here's the thing that nobody was talking about in the immediate aftermath of that Chiefs game. Hamstring injuries for a player like Lamar Jackson aren't like hamstring injuries for a player like Tom Brady or a player like Peyton Manning. This is a guy whose entire game is built off of explosiveness, on cutting on a dime, on making defenders miss in the open field. The initial report said that he'd miss 2 to 3 weeks, which meant the Ravens would have to navigate at least 1, maybe 2 games without their franchise player. And with the way this season is going, losing Lamar for even a single game felt like a death sentence. Well, the Baltimore Ravens came into this season prepared for this scenario. Enter Cooper Rush. Now look, Cooper Rush isn't a bad quarterback. The dude went 9-5 as a starter with the Dallas Cowboys over his career, and the Ravens signed him to a 2-year, $6.2 million deal specifically for moments like this. He's what you'd call a caretaker quarterback. Someone who can manage a game, protect the football, and not lose you games with boneheaded mistakes. The problem is, the Ravens in week 5 didn't need a caretaker. They needed a miracle worker. You see, Cooper Rush in the past was managing a Dallas Cowboys team that had a go-to option in CeeDee Lamb and also had one of the most fearsome defenses in the entire NFL. The Baltimore Ravens don't really have any of that. They have a battered offensive line, they have injuries on the defensive side of the ball, so they needed more of a playmaker than someone that could just steady the ship, and that was very evident when they faced off against the Houston Texans. Now, the Houston Texans came in at 1-3 themselves, but at the same time, the Texans had one of the best pass rushes in football with Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter. And here's where it gets even worse for Baltimore. Cooper Rush's average time to throw in his career is 2.36 seconds, which is fast, sure, but he's not Lamar Jackson. He can't extend plays with his legs. He can't turn a broken play into a 40-yard gain. The guy's a statue back there. Now, before we get to the actual game, let me paint you a picture of just how dire the injury situation was for Baltimore heading into this matchup. Roquan Smith was out. Marlon Humphrey was out. Kyle Hamilton was out. Ronnie Stanley was out. Nnamdi Madubuike is already done for the season. The Ravens were basically playing with their third string defense and a backup quarterback against a Texans team that was desperate for a win. And John Harbaugh, in his infinite wisdom, decided to roll out with the exact same offensive game plan that they've been running with Lamar Jackson. And that's problem number one. The game started okay, I guess. Cooper Rush led the Ravens on their opening drive and they kicked a field goal going up 3-0. Rush completed all 5 of his passes on that drive for 59 yards, and for a brief moment, Ravens fans probably thought, okay, maybe we can escape here with a win. But then reality hit. Alright, it did more than hit. It smacked the living hell out of them. The Ravens went 3 and out on their next 2 possessions to end the half, and the Texans started to figure out that, hey, this guy behind center might not be Lamar Jackson. Maybe we should just tee off on him. The second half was an absolute massacre. Cooper Rush threw 3 interceptions in the final 2 quarters. And these weren't even good interceptions where he was trying to make a play down the field with the game on the line. You know, those Dak Prescott interceptions that are perfect throws, hit his receiver's hands, and then just find their way into the defender's hands. But then everyone blames Dak Prescott for him for some reason because, I don't know, he's the Cowboys quarterback. And I'm not saying this just because I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan or anything like that. These Cooper Rush interceptions were bad throws, bad decisions, the kind of plays that make you wonder if he even watched film before the game. The final score was 44-10. The Texans put up 44 points on the Ravens at home. At M&T Bank Stadium, the house that Ray Lewis built, it tied the worst home loss in Ravens history, matching that 41-7 beatdown they took from the Patriots back in 2013. And it wasn't just the offense that was terrible. The defense, which was already the worst in football, somehow found a way to get even worse. On the very first drive, they allowed CJ Stroud and the Texans to score their first offensive touchdown against Baltimore. And remember, the Texans had failed to score an offensive touchdown in their previous 3 meetings with the Ravens. The defense looked lost, confused, like they had no idea what they were supposed to be doing on any given play. Derrick Henry, who was supposed to be the equalizer on offense, carried the ball 15 times for just 33 yards. For those of you guys that don't want to do the advanced calculus, it's 2.2 yards per carry for a guy who's supposed to be one of the most dominant running backs in the league. After the game, fans were booing throughout the second half, and I mean, can you blame them? This team came into the season as Super Bowl favorites, and now they were 1-4 with their franchise quarterback hurt and their season hanging by a thread. The Ravens defense had now allowed 133 points through 4 games, which was the most in franchise history through 4 games. And after adding 44 against Houston, they were at 177 points allowed through 5 games, which was far and away the most in the entire NFL. Now here's where things get really interesting, and this is the part that nobody's really talking about enough. The Ravens are still somehow favorites to win the AFC North at 1-4. Their odds at BetMGM are plus 105, just barely ahead of the Pittsburgh Steelers at plus 110. The Bengals are at 16-1 because Joe Burrow's on injured reserve, and the Browns are at 18-1 because, well, they're the Browns. So on paper, yeah, the Ravens technically still have a path to the playoffs, but let's be real about what this path actually looks like. Since 1990, only 35 teams have started their season 1-3 and still made it to the playoffs. That's not great odds to begin with, but here's the kicker. Since the NFL expanded to 14 playoff teams in 2021, only 7% of teams that started 1-3 made the postseason. The Ravens are now 1-4, which is even worse. They would need to go 9-4 over their remaining games just to get to 10-7, which was the record that the Broncos had last year as the 7th seed. 9-4 with this defense, with an offensive line that can't protect anyone, with Lamar Jackson potentially missing multiple more games, and with one of the toughest remaining schedules in football. Let me break down their schedule for you, because this is where you really just start to see how impossible the task is ahead of them. In week 6, they've got the Rams at home. The Rams are 3-1. They've got Matthew Stafford, Devontae Adams, and Puka Nacua, who is on this crazy crazy revenge tour ever since he got divorced. I mean, I'm personally rooting for Puka, but I'm terrified of this human being. This man is on pace to have the best Rams wide receiver season since Cooper Kupp, when Cooper Kupp won his Triple Crown. And oh yeah, the Ravens are 7.5-point underdogs in their own stadium. That should tell you everything you need to know about where this team is at right now. And the worst part, Lamar's status for that game is still uncertain. He missed his first practice of the week, and while Jay Glazer reported there's an outside shot that he could play, nobody's exactly holding their breath. If they lose to the Rams, they'll be 1-5 heading into their bye week, and at that point, you can pretty much stick a fork into this season. Week 7 is their bye week, which is probably the best thing that could happen to them right now. Lamar gets an extra week to heal, some of these defensive guys might be able to get back on the field, and John Harbaugh gets 2 weeks to figure out what the hell is wrong with his football team. But then look at what happens after the bye. Week 8, they've got the Bears at home. Alright, that's manageable. Week 9, they're at Miami for Thursday Night Football. That's a short week on the road against a Dolphins team that typically plays well at home, but this has been a pretty funky Dolphins season, and if you guys want us to bring an update as to what is going on with Mike McDaniel, because this press conference seems weird.
He was really frustrated at the, just like he's as I was, and we talked about the challenge ahead to get ready for the Chargers, and that was kind of the extent of it.
Then let us know in the comment section down below. But week 10, they're at Minnesota, and the Minnesota Vikings, on paper, are one of the best teams in football. Then week 13, they've got the Bengals on Thanksgiving, which is going to be massive for division standings, and then they close the season with 2 games against the Steelers in weeks 14 and 18, plus games against the Bengals again, the Patriots, and a trip to Green Bay to face the Packers. That's not an easy schedule at all. And remember, this Ravens team has already shown that they can't beat good teams. Their only win came against the Browns in week 2. They lost to the Bills, they lost to the Lions, they got destroyed by the Chiefs, and they got embarrassed at home by the Texans. So when you look at that remaining schedule and you think about them needing to go 9-4, it starts to feel less like a challenge and more like a pipe dream. But here's what I think is the most interesting storyline moving forward, and this is something that's been brewing under the surface all season long. The John Harbaugh question. Now I know what you're thinking. John Harbaugh won a Super Bowl. He's been the head coach in Baltimore for 18 years. He's one of the most successful coaches in the NFL. There's no way his job is in jeopardy. And you'd be right to think that, because Harbaugh's regular season winning percentage is 61.8%, which is higher than Bill Walsh, Chuck Noll, Pete Carroll, Sean Payton, and Sean McVay. He's 13-11 in the playoffs, which is a better record than Mike Tomlin. The guy knows how to win football games. But here's the thing, it's been 13 years since that last Super Bowl. And in the Lamar Jackson era, which started in 2018, the Ravens are 1-6 against the Chiefs. They've lost 8 games since 2021 when they had a win probability of at least 90%. And no other team has lost more than 5 such games in that span. This is a team that consistently blows double-digit leads. They've blown 8 double-digit leads since the start of the 2022 season, while the Bills and Chiefs have blown a combined 4. That's not bad luck, that's a pattern. And the fans are starting to notice. After that loss to the Texans, social media was on fire with people calling for Harbaugh's head. Comments like, Harbaugh's messaging has become so stale and uninspiring, and time to move on, were everywhere. The Baltimore Banner's comment section was lighting up, and look, I get it. Fan bases are fickle. They want blood after every loss, but this feels different. This feels like 17 years of frustrations finally boiling over. Now, would this be a mid-season firing? No, because ownership hasn't fired a head coach in the middle of the season since 2007 when Brian Billick was fired, and back then, that was because the locker room was in disarray. But Kyle Van Noy was asked after the Texans game whether the coach's teachings were sticking with the players, and he hesitated before responding.
That's probably a question that's above my pay grade, probably. I think that's a Harbaugh and CO question, to be honest. I think their messaging is fine.
Notice how he said fine, not great, not inspiring, but fine. That's the kind of answer that makes you wonder if there's dissension in the locker room. And then there's Zach Orr, the defensive coordinator. Orr was Harbaugh's hand-picked successor to Mike Macdonald, who left to become the head coach in Seattle and has started the season 3-2 this year. Orr has been under fire since week 1 when the Ravens blew that fourth quarter lead to the Bills. The defense has been terrible all season, and a lot of that falls on Orr's shoulders, but Harbaugh has been protected protective of him, which makes sense because Orr is his guy. But if Zach Orr fails, it reflects poorly on Harbaugh's judgment. The sad reality is that this Ravens season is probably already over. Since the NFL expanded to 14 playoff teams in 2021, it's basically impossible to recover from a 1-4 start. There are just too many good teams in the AFC. The Bills are rolling, the Chiefs always find a way, the Steelers are playing better than anyone expected with Aaron Rodgers, the Jaguars and Colts have both surprised people in the AFC South. There's just no room for a team with this many problems. And you know what the really frustrating part is? This was supposed to be the year. They have Derrick Henry coming off of one of the greatest rushing seasons of all time. To take pressure off of Lamar in the playoffs, they had one of the most talented rosters in football from top to bottom. They were Super Bowl favorites for a reason, and it's all fallen apart in the span of 5 weeks. So where do the Ravens go from here? Well, John Harbaugh said after the Texans lost that everything is on the table and that the urgency is high. He needs to figure out who this team is over the next few weeks heading into and coming out of the bye. They need to get healthy. They need to fix the offensive line. They need to figure out what the hell is wrong with the defense, and they need to do it fast because the margin for error at 1-4 is basically zero. But let me know in the comment section down below, especially if you're a Ravens fan, what do you think is going to happen? How do you think the Ravens are going to close out the season? Are you already giving up on the Baltimore Ravens as a Ravens fan? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.